Hello, witches. I am Harperistess or Sophinus. You might be a little bit confused about the title, Bin Laden, Letter to America. What? Why are you talking about Bin Laden? Were you even born when the Twin Towers were brought down? Okay, yeah. First of all, I'm talking about the Bin Laden letter because it's gotten back to me from some witches who are actually agreeing with him in the letter. And because I was 10 years old, living in New York and Brooklyn when the Twin Towers were brought down. Matter of fact, my parents moved to New York because the Twin Towers were finally completed and they wanted to find employment, which they did. So I'm not a person that was born in 2000. I was actually born in 1990. Okay, so that would make me 10 years old in 2001. I watched those planes slam into the Twin Towers. But what the hell does Bin Laden's letter to America have to do with witches? You witches are sending me links to the letter and agreeing with him, oddly enough. And a lot of you witches were born after September 11th, 2001. So you may be 22, 23 years old. You're definitely not over the age of 30. And you've sent me the letter. I read the letter in 2002 when I was 13 years old, when it was widely available and I understood every word. Bin Laden's letter is not something that should be celebrated or glorified. In the letter, if you actually read it and comprehend it, he's gloating. He's making references to the LGBTQ community. Can you imagine if Bin Laden had power in the U.S.? You people who are LGBTQ would be the first to be exterminated? Oh, yes. Us witches would be not too far behind of being killed off too. Bin Laden was a terrorist. Now, I know some of you might say, well, America did a lot of bad stuff in the Middle East. Yes. I know some of you who are much older than me might say, well, the U.S. did a lot of bad stuff in the Vietnam War. Yes, that's true. Listen, America is not a perfect angel. It's not a perfect angel. It's not a perfect angel. I understand that some of you actually hate America. I know that. Can I talk to you real here? But for you witches who should know better than anybody else, just by being in the know, just by being highly intelligent, by being powerhouses, by being highly intuitive, should know that Bin Laden was a terrorist. The letter to America is him gloating, bragging, boasting about it. He's celebrating it. And you send me links to TikTok, Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, or X, whatever the hell Twitter is called right now, to say, look, he was right. You send me these letters to try to justify your support of Palestine or even your support of the terrorist group known as Hamas. Hamas is a terrorist group. It is. And I get so upset when I see witches agreeing to things like Bin Laden's letter to America. It's nothing to celebrate. There's nothing to agree with him about. Bin Laden was a fraud, a liar, a cheat. He was not born poor. His father was a billionaire. Bin Laden never liberated anybody. He wanted to kill everybody who was not Islamic. So what does that mean? That means witches, me and you, people who are members of the LGBTQ community would be the first to be killed off. That letter is not to be glorified or used to say, see, you see how badly the United States treated people in the Middle East. And you know, I already told you this. There is no such thing as the Middle East. It is all Africa. There is no such place as the Middle East. It is all Africa. The Middle East is not real. It does not exist. It is all Africa. Bin Laden's letter to America and witches, I can't believe this. Witches supporting that letter, agreeing with that letter, are on another planet. I don't know what planet they are on, but it is not Earth, and they are not living in reality. They're not. And honestly, I would probably, even though I don't have the power to do so, I would, if I did have the power to do so, I would strip them of their title of being a witch. I would. Absolutely I would. Because how can you be that stupid? You can't tell me that you comprehended what the letter said and still agree with Bin Laden's stance as to why he had people hijack planes and crash them in the Twin Towers, crash them in Washington, and crash them in a field in Philadelphia. You can't. You simply can't. You must be every name in the book. Stupid, foolish, a ignoramus, a retard. Simple as that. You must be, but you are certainly not a witch to me. Listen, it's even made the news. It's even made the news about people, especially on TikTok, glorifying his letter, agreeing with his letter, and they really don't understand because they didn't live through it. I lived through September 11th, 2001. I was 10 years old when it happened. I understood what was happening. Okay, I've seen the towers like hundreds of times because I live in New York. I've been to the Empire State Building hundreds of times before the attacks on September 11th. Hundreds of times. I lived through it. I just told you a few moments ago. When the letter came out, I read it. And I understood it. At 13 years old, I understood it. And he was wrong. Some people like to compare Bin Laden to Hitler, to Mussolini, to Stalin. That's fine because Bin Laden killed a lot of people. He was a monster who created more monsters. Who created more monsters that still live today, like Hamas, for example. But people are using Bin Laden's letter to justify supporting Palestine. Palestine is not Hamas. Hamas is a terrorist organization. Hamas is a terrorist organization. Hamas is not Palestine. They are not the same people. They are not. You have to be able to separate them. Just like Afghanistan was not Al-Qaeda. They're two different people. I personally feel like it took too long to find bin Laden and kill him. I felt like we should have found him sooner. I feel like he should have been captured alive, brought back to America to stand trial, and be given the death penalty. I believe that he should have been paraded naked, dead, in the streets of New York and have New Yorkers do whatever they want to do with his dead body, just like the Italians did to Mussolini. That's what I feel like should have took place. But to hear witches support this letter, to repost this letter and pick and choose pieces of the letter to make as a post or make as a TikTok and say, here, look at or the crimes the United States have committed against Afghanistan, against Islam, against the Muslims. And these are the same people who were born in 1999, 2002, 1998, 2003. They have no idea what they're talking about, because they did not live it. You have to be very careful with social media. You have to be very careful with social media so you don't end up looking stupid. Because when I see people born in 1998 posting about bin Laden's letter to America, I think to myself, shut up. You did not live it. You may have been alive, but you don't have vivid memories of those planes slamming into the Twin Towers like I do. Because I lived it. You didn't. You were just on the bandwagon of reposting this letter to use as an excuse to support Palestine. You can support Palestine without making reference to this letter. That is all about boasting and bragging about the attacks on September 11th, 2001. Bin Laden was not being oppressed. His father was a billionaire. Why is that so hard for some of you to understand? Or you just don't want to understand? You just don't give a shit. But for a witch to post it is shocking. Because you would think a witch would know better. That they would be smart. Witches do know better. Witches are highly intelligent. But to see witches who happen to be Palestinian supporting this letter, reposting this letter, and picking and choosing parts of the letter that fits their narrative about how they feel about Israel attacking Palestine, how they feel about the United States involvement in supporting Israel, that makes me upset. Bin Laden was a monster who created more monsters. He's not to be celebrated. He's not to be celebrated. Honestly, he should have been tortured and then killed. That's what should have happened to him. That's not harsh. That's not evil. That's not mean. It's the truth. That's what should have happened to him, because he deserved it. But to post this letter as a witch and then to foolishly agree with it, to agree with any part of it, tells me that you have a long way to go. You have to mature as a witch. I'm not being pro-American. I'm being pro-truth. I am being pro-truth. Because a lot of you witches were not born when it happened. Or you were too young to remember it. You may have been 3 or 4 years old. I was 10 years old. I saw it happen in real time. And it was shocking. It was traumatic. It will always be traumatic. It's something that I have to live with for the rest of my life. I do. But for a witch to post it in the way of showing sympathy to bin Laden, that's how people become radicalized. Terrorist groups don't necessarily need to come to our borders. It's mostly domestic terrorists that will tear this country apart, not foreign enemies. I know lots of you have conspiracy theories about the attacks on September 11th, which has no basis in truth, which you have no proof of. It's just conspiracy theories. It's just you talking out of your ass. It is. It's just what you found on Reddit. It's just what you found on the dark web. It's just what you heard some podcaster talking about on TikTok or on Apple Music. But it's not truth. It's just you talking. It's just you getting on the bandwagon. It's not true. It didn't happen like that. And of course, there are still people who believe conspiracy theories about the attacks on Pearl Harbor. Roosevelt didn't know anything about the attacks beforehand. He didn't. I don't know why I'm talking about Pearl Harbor, but older people who lived through Pearl Harbor, who are still alive, they made the connection between Pearl Harbor and the attacks on September 11th, which I can understand why. But back to this letter. This letter is a letter to America, but it's a letter of bin Laden gloating about it. And you can't take anything he says as truth. You can't take anything bin Laden says as truth. He was a manipulator. He was a fraud. He was a liar. He was a wannabe. He wanted to make everybody in the world a Muslim and kill off disbelievers. That sounds a lot like Christians today. A lot of Christians are like that today. But that's a different conversation for another time. But that's what bin Laden wanted to do. That's what the letter is about. It's just a sob story blaming the U.S. for their problems because they don't want to take personal responsibility for their problems. But for a witch to post it as gospel, as truth, as an excuse to support Palestine or a excuse to support Hamas is borderline retarded. I can only say it's like that. I can only say it's like that. If you got offended that I used the word retarded, you will be okay. If you rewatch this live broadcast, you will understand why I said that. Because it's true. Because it's true. That's why I said it. So for you witches posting this letter to America by bin Laden and sending it to me, I don't want to hear it. Because it's not a letter to be glorified or to be agreed upon. And I feel like a lot of witches doing this is just doing it for clout, just doing it for attention, just doing it to go viral, just doing it to monetize their posts. Oh, I know it. So I had to come on here and finally address this, because some of you witches watching this live or watching the replay or sharing this broadcast have sent me this letter consistently and asked me my opinion about it. I already told you witches the truth about Palestine and the Israel conflict. You can go back and re-watch that live broadcast from a couple weeks ago, back in October, and decide for yourself if you want to agree with what Hecate told her high priestess, well, one of her high priestesses, or you want to go on living in your own fantasy land. So I had to come on here and to address this, because Hecate put it in my spirit to come on here live and to address this letter to America by Bin Laden that has been reposted a lot by witches who happen to be Palestinian, and tell the truth. Unfiltered, uncensored. No watering it down. No using pretty colors and pretty words. Not being afraid to offend some people with the truth that I have just spoken. So this was not just me coming on here just to come on here to talk about this. This was Hecate, the queen of witches, putting it in my spirit to finally address this publicly. This is all Hecate. All of the queen of witches. So thank you, witches, for popping on to this live broadcast about this topic that has gone viral. And I will leave this up for the replay. Do share this broadcast in your stories on your other social media platforms, and tell a fellow witch who has read this letter that there is a high priestess in New York who is anointed and appointed by the queen of witches, Hecate, to deliver the truth about witches, witchcraft, and the queen of witches, Hecate, so that they too may have real significant and permanently positive change. I will speak to you witches next time. Bye, everyone.